I raised and processed my own chickens for the very first time, and I'm here to talk about it. Let me just preface this by saying that since moving to North Carolina a few years ago, my family has had the goal of raising and growing our own food for a lot of different reasons: health, sustainability, just frankly for the experience. So much of our store-bought stuff has just not sat well, I know, for my digestive system. I don't think it does particularly well for our girls either. And given we're here, we might as well take full advantage and see if we can really get into like the homesteading life. This year, I raised and processed 15 Bresse broiler or meat birds. I thought I'd start by just talking about why I picked this particular breed of chicken. When people think about a broiler chicken, they usually start off with something like a Cornish cross or a jumbo Cornish cross. Cornish cross, something that grows fast, 8 weeks start to finish. They don't need a ton of space. One of my friends introduced me to something called a Bresse chicken. Now, Bresse are a heritage breed. They originally derived from France. The Bresse breed emerged as a distinct breed like 500 years ago in France. Technically, you can't export a live Bresse bird. France has restrictions on that. So in order to get the American Bresse, which is what I raised, at some point along the line, they were stolen out of France. Having said that, they're here now. They're still considered a heritage breed, and they are bred from French stock. What makes these birds so unique is that they live for a longer life period, so closer to 4 months instead of 2, which means they're naturally going to be a little slower growing, which also means they're going to be healthier. When I went through my first experience processing chickens, it was with a friend of mine and all of her standard broiler chickens, and a lot of them ended up with tumors and all kinds of health problems that we came across as we were processing them. It makes sense why people do it that way. The opportunity to work with a bird that's a little bit healthier certainly makes me feel better about the whole thing. The other thing that makes them unique is that they're really good foragers and they have a lot more energy, which means you really want to be able to free range them. In order to meet the French standard, from 5 weeks to the beginning of the finishing process, you need to have them out on pasture. Technically at least 10 square meters per bird, which is a lot of space. I don't have that much space. I had 15 meat birds in like a good sized pasture, but it wasn't quite as intensive as what you would see in France. So the good news is they're foraging a lot. You're going to reduce your feed costs. They're a little probably happier because they're out living their best life. The downside is with any kind of high foraging bird is the meat is naturally going to be a little stringier than what you might be used to. So what you would normally do for the last, let's say, week to 10 days of their life is you put them in what's called an epinette. I didn't end up doing this part. We didn't get around to building an epinette. It's effectively like a roomy wooden cage, and you feed them a diet of milk and corn, and that fattens them up. It relaxes all their muscles, and it's supposed to turn them into world-class chicken to eat. So we got most of the way there. I was a little concerned that maybe they would be too stringy. We had my brother-in-law and father-in-law over for dinner. I made just a standard Julia Child's recipe. I roasted it in the oven. It was the most unique and delicious chicken I think I've ever had in my life. If you had told me this was not chicken, it was just another breed of bird, I would have believed you. It was so flavorful. The chicken breast was particularly tender. The legs had a bit more of that chewy consistency, but honestly, compared to like, for example, a guinea fowl, which is very stringy, I really didn't notice hardly any difference. What's super cool about being involved in the whole life cycle of a chicken like that, the feeling of pride by the time you sit down at the dinner table. I got them as chicks. I raised them through adulthood. I did the processing myself. I did the harvesting myself. And then I prepared the meal myself. To share that meal with my family was incredibly special. I did do guineas and turkeys last year, and I know Thanksgiving in particular was really, really special, but I'd never done this volume of birds before. To see my freezer full of chickens that I can now feed my family over the next half year, let's say, it's incredible. Is it the most cost-effective thing on the planet? Definitely not. By the time you add in your feed costs, buying the chickens, the losses that you get, processing costs themselves, either you're renting the equipment or you're buying the equipment. We had a friend of ours help us, but we're definitely going to be paying for her efforts. It all adds up and it starts to get really expensive. There's ways to cut down on costs. If you get specialty feeders, you can reduce your feed costs. If you start breeding the chickens themselves, you don't have to buy the chickens up front. If you slowly invest in the equipment, then you're not paying anyone to help you process the chickens. Having said that, I guess I'd ask, like, what are you comparing that to? If you're comparing it to the price of like a Purdue chicken from Walmart, the quality is just so different. I mean, you don't even have to watch this video for you to know that. But if you're just talking from a pure dollar to dollar perspective, Purdue's gonna be cheaper. Personally, I think this was well worth it. Up until I had finished processing, I was like really questioning whether I liked doing meat birds. Part of it is that we're not really in an ideal setup here. Our rescue dogs are just, their paddock is just too close to the meat bird paddock. There was some escape attempts happening on both sides. We did lose a number of chickens, which is really too bad. Ultimately, I know that at our farmhouse next year, we're gonna build out our system so that we don't incur those kinds of losses, so that we can maximize both our foster dogs' lives and our poultry livestock and all that kind of stuff. That was my experience with raising, processing, harvesting, cooking, consuming my own chickens from start to finish. The only part I really missed was, I guess, the hatching of the eggs. If anyone has space to allow for breast chickens on their property, highly recommend them. I would recommend trying to find a breeder. If you go to hatcheries, oftentimes they'll be labeled as breast, but they're not actually breast chickens. So just keep an eye on that. If you would like to support our foster dog efforts as well as our heritage breed conservation efforts, be sure to click the link in my bio. Our Shopify store is up and live. We're going to be coming up with new merch in a few weeks. This is one of the shirts from the store. A portion of the proceeds also go to Friends of Madison County, which is an incredible spay-neuter program here in our county. So if you're interested in anything to do with hobby farming, raising chickens, heritage breed, definitely hit that subscribe button, and I'd love to connect with you, hear your thoughts if you want to comment below.